So what protections do residents have during this time? I'm Steve Rosenberg with Mynd Property Management. Today I'm talking with Giles Emery, legal counsel for Mynd Property Management, where we discuss this issue. Giles, what protections do residents have during this time?
So Steve, there's several protections as a property owner needs to look at in terms if they're trying to qualify what their particular resident has in place. And it starts with the Federal CARES Act. And I start there because that's a federal act and it applies to all properties regardless of where you're located. So the CARES Act was put into place about a month ago, and it goes through July 25th, 2020. And basically, the gist of that act is if you're covered by that act, and we can go in a little bit later on how you determine if you are covered by the federal act, then you cannot serve a notice to vacate, which is basically the initiation of an eviction proceeding on any resident that is in default for failure to pay rent. You can't charge late fees, and there's nothing the tenant has to do to garner protection under that act. They automatically get protection under that act, unlike some of the state or city initiatives that I'll talk about as well, that may require that you actually be COVID-19 impacted. The Federal CARES Act just covers you automatically. So that's your starting point, is determining whether your property is a covered property under the CARES Act. And I'll go into sort of how you do determine what are the factors for determining that in a little bit. And then assuming you're not subject to the Federal CARES Act, the next thing you're going to want to look at is there a state order in my particular state, if I'm in California or Georgia, wherever, Colorado, wherever I may be, has the governor put out his or her own initiative that has an eviction moratorium tied into it. And those typically, they can be they vary from state to state, so you've got to look at your specific state. And that'll have something similar to the CARES Act, but it may say that you can't even initiate or serve a notice, or it may say that the courts aren't allowed to issue a summons, which is slightly different, meaning you could actually file an eviction. This is all, I should back up, this is all assuming that you've got a tenant that's not paying rent.
Right.
So your various states may have an order, and then if your state does or doesn't, next level down would be the county and or city that your property is located in. Each of those could have their own initiatives or executive orders in place that may be even more protective than the state level, for example. So you've kind of got to flesh out all these different levels, starting with the Federal CARES Act. If you're not covered there, what's in place at the state level through your particular governor, and then down to the county your property's in, and then ultimately the city. Does the city have its own initiative that you need to understand and check out what you can and can't do in terms of dealing with tenants that are in a non-payment situation.
And do we know how long this will last for? Like, is this, it's going to extend and extend? And is there a time, like, is it now until June, or is there a certain date that they've said, or is this a rolling extension?
Well, yeah. So in terms of the Federal CARES Act, that, unless it's extended right now, that expires. It was put in place for 120 days. So the 120 days expires on July 25th. So assuming it's not extended, that would roll off as of July 25th if you are a covered property under the CARES Act. The state orders typically go into place for like 30 days unless the governor extends them. So we've seen extensions already. So it's something you're going to have to check back on. And once, if you make a note of when your governor's executive order expires, a lot of them are expiring at the end of, right now, the ones that are in place, most of them expire from what I've seen around on May 31st. So, but you're going to need to check and make sure that the governor hasn't extended the executive order or issued a new executive order that takes it in beyond that date.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Giles. I appreciate your time, and we'll see you next time.